Welcome to The Silent Creep. If you enjoy chilling horror narrations, terrifying true tales, and spine-tingling mysteries, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. New nightmares are waiting for you. By the second night in Mrs. Calloway's house, I had already learned which floorboards creaked and which lights made the windows look black from inside. My name is Nora, I was 23, and I worked as a pharmacy tech in Toledo, Ohio. I was house-sitting for Mrs. Calloway, one of our regular customers, while she stayed with her son after a knee surgery. I needed the money because my car had failed inspection, and she offered me more cash than I made in 3 shifts. The strange part started before it was even dark. I was standing at the kitchen counter, eating microwave rice straight out of the plastic bowl, when I heard the mail slot flap open and close. It was loud in that quiet old house, like a metal mouth snapping shut. Mrs. Calloway's mail came through a slot in the front door and landed in a little basket below it. I walked over, expecting a flyer or some late delivery notice. There was no envelope, just the flap moving a tiny bit, like someone had let go of it from the outside. I stood there with the bowl in my hand and listened. The street outside was calm. No footsteps, no car door, no talking. I told myself it was probably wind pressure or the old spring in the mail slot. The house was from the 1950s and made a noise every time the heat kicked on. Mrs. Calloway had warned me about that. She had left me a whole binder on the kitchen table with instructions for the plants, trash pickup, the upstairs bathroom that ran too long, and how to feed her orange cat, Stanley. The binder also said to keep the porch light on after 6. I had laughed at that when I first read it. It sounded like something my grandma would write. I turned the porch light on. For context, Mrs. Calloway lived in a quiet neighborhood in Sylvania, just outside Toledo. Nice ranch houses, trimmed yards, retired people who waved from driveways. I grew up in apartments where you could hear people fighting through the walls, so her street felt almost too quiet to me. I thought that meant safe. I was alone because she had no family nearby, and her son lived near Columbus. She trusted me because I filled her prescriptions every month and carried them out to her car sometimes. I liked her. I also liked that she paid half up front. I had been on my own only a few months, and I was constantly worried about money. That made me say yes to things fast. Too fast sometimes. After the mail slot thing, I checked the front window. There was a white pickup parked across the street, but I had seen it the day before. A lot of houses had work trucks in the driveways there. I didn't think much of it. Around 7, the doorbell rang. I opened the inside wooden door, but left the storm door locked. A woman stood on the porch holding a small paper bag. She looked normal. Late 40s maybe. Gray sweatshirt. Hair in a clip. No mask, no sunglasses, no weird smile. "Is Marlene here?" she asked. Marlene was Mrs. Calloway's first name. I didn't like that she knew it, but it wasn't private. Her name was on half the mail. "She's not available," I said. The woman looked past my shoulder into the living room. Not in a dramatic way. Just a quick look, like she was checking where the furniture was. "I'm dropping this off for her," she said. "What is it?" "Just something she asked for." She didn't mention anything to me. The woman's face changed a little. Not angry. More like she was deciding whether I mattered. "She'll know," she said. She set the bag down and walked off the porch. I watched her get into the passenger side of the white pickup across the street. The truck drove away without headlights for maybe 30 feet, then the lights came on. That bothered me, but I still didn't call anyone. I was trying not to make a big deal out of a paper bag. I had this bad habit back then of being polite even when something felt wrong, because I hated feeling dramatic. I waited until the truck was gone, then opened the storm door and picked up the bag. Inside was a jar of strawberry jam. No note, no label. The seal was already broken. I put it in the trash outside, then came back in and locked the door. I checked it twice, even though the lock felt solid. At 8:30, Mrs. Calloway's son called to ask if everything was okay. I almost told him about the woman, but I stopped myself. I was embarrassed. I didn't want him to think I was nervous and couldn't handle staying in an old lady's house. So I said everything was fine. Stanley sat near the hallway and stared at the front door for a while. I know cats stare at nothing all the time, but he stayed there so long I got annoyed and carried him into the kitchen. A little after 9, I heard a soft scrape from the front of the house. Not a knock. more like something sliding across the porch. I muted the TV. The house went quiet. The scrape came again, slow and close. I walked into the entryway and looked through the peephole. No one was there. The porch light was on. I could see the welcome mat, the brick steps, and the empty street beyond. Nothing moved. Then the mail slot opened. This time I saw it from inside. The little flap lifted up, slowly, and a phone appeared in the opening. Only the top of it, the camera side. It was angled upward, moving left to right, like someone was trying to see the entryway. I stepped back so fast I hit the wall. The phone disappeared. The flap dropped shut. I stood there with both hands over my mouth, not because I was screaming, but because I didn't want to make any sound at all. For a few seconds I couldn't move. My brain tried to make it normal. Maybe a kid was messing around. Maybe the woman had the wrong house and came back. Maybe someone wanted to check if Marlene was home. Then I saw a piece of paper on the floor. It had been pushed through the slot while I was standing there. It was folded once. I didn't want to touch it. I grabbed it with 2 fingers and opened it. It was a torn piece of lined notebook paper. On it, someone had written, "Garage empty. Girl inside. Backlight no camera. Cat. Am not there." I read it 3 times before it made sense. My car was in the garage because Mrs. Calloway told me to park there. She said street parking made the neighborhood look messy. So from outside, it probably looked like no one was staying there unless they had seen me. And somebody had. I called Mrs. Calloway's son first instead of 911. That sounds dumb, but I was scared in this frozen, practical way. I wanted someone who knew the house to tell me what to do. He picked up on the second ring. "Nora? There's someone outside," I whispered. "What?" "Someone put a note through the mail slot. They know your mom isn't here." His voice changed immediately. "Lock yourself in a room and call the police." As he said that, I heard something at the back of the house. A dull, careful sound. Metal against metal. The kitchen door had a small mudroom attached to it. The mudroom led to the back patio. Mrs. Calloway kept gardening gloves and snow shovels out there. The outside door to the mudroom had a separate lock, and I knew I had locked it because it was in the binder. I walked halfway to the kitchen, still holding the phone. The mudroom door handle moved. Not hard, just down a little. Then up, down again. Someone was testing it. Mrs. Calloway's son was still talking, but I barely heard him. I backed away, turned off the kitchen light, and went down the hallway toward the bedrooms. Then the house phone rang. It was an old landline on the side table in the living room. The ring was loud and sharp. I almost dropped my cell. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I didn't answer. A voicemail machine clicked on. A man's voice came through the speaker. "Marlene, it's Tom. We got the wrong day. Let us in and we'll be quick." I didn't know who Tom was. The voice was calm. That made it worse. He didn't sound drunk or angry. He sounded like someone calling about a delivery. The message ended. Then my cell phone rang. It was Mrs. Calloway's son again because I had accidentally hung up. "Where are you?" he said. "In the hall. Get into the office. There's a lock on that door." The office was the smallest bedroom. I ran in, shut the door, and turned the thumb lock. It was weak, one of those little privacy locks. I pushed a chair under the handle anyway. I called 911 from the corner behind the desk. The dispatcher asked for the address, and I had to crawl to the binder because I didn't know it by heart. My fingers were shaking so bad I almost couldn't read the number. While I was talking, I heard the mudroom door open. It did not crash open. It opened the way a door opens when someone has a key or knows exactly how to work the latch. A cold draft moved through the house. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and asked if I could get out safely. I said no. I could hear the person in the kitchen. One set of footsteps, then another. There were 2 people inside. A man whispered something I couldn't make out. A woman answered, "She's here." I pulled the phone away from my mouth and pressed it into my shirt so they wouldn't hear the dispatcher. The footsteps moved into the living room. The man said, "Bags on the counter?" The woman said, "No." She tossed it. That was when I understood the jam wasn't random. It was some kind of test. They wanted to see if I would bring it inside, leave it there, act normal, maybe open the door again. The office had 1 window. It opened to the side yard, but it had a screen and was too small to climb through easily. I unlocked it anyway and pushed it up as quietly as I could. The screen stuck. A floorboard creaked outside the office door. I stopped moving. The hallway light was still on. I could see shadows under the door. Someone stood there. The handle moved. The chair under it scraped an inch across the wood. I held my breath and pressed the phone tighter to my chest. The handle moved again, harder. A man said very low, "Open the door." I didn't answer. He knocked once with his knuckle. "Nora." Hearing my name in that house did something to me. I had a name tag at work. Mrs. Calloway's son had said my name over the phone earlier. The woman at the door might have heard it, or maybe they had watched me at the pharmacy. I still don't know. The man knocked again. "You don't need to make this ugly." He wasn't shouting. That was the part one still remember most. He sounded annoyed, like I was holding up a job. The dispatcher's voice came faintly from my phone. I whispered, "They're at the door." The man went quiet. Then he kicked the bottom of the door. The chair jumped. The lock held, but the wood cracked near the latch. I grabbed the heavy glass paperweight from the desk. It was shaped like a bird. I don't know what I planned to do with it. I just needed something in my hand. A bright white light suddenly filled the office window. Then another. Car headlights swept across the wall, and I heard tires outside. The man at the door moved away. Fast. The woman said, "Go." Footsteps ran through the house. A door slammed somewhere in the back. I heard Stanley hiss from the kitchen, then the mudroom door banged. The police arrived maybe 1 minute later, but it felt like 20. I stayed in the office until an officer called my name through the door and told me Mrs. Calloway's son had given them the office location. They found the back mudroom door open. No one was inside the house. The lock on the mudroom door wasn't broken. That confused everyone until an officer found a key under the rubber mat outside, pushed deep into one corner. Mrs. Calloway had not told me about it. Her son didn't know it was there either. She later admitted she had kept a spare there for years because she was afraid of locking herself out. The paper note was real. The police took it. They also found something under the front porch chair the next morning. It was a folded page from a little spiral notebook. It had 3 days of notes about the house. What time the porch light came on. When trash cans went to the curb. When Mrs. Calloway's car left with her son. When I arrived with my backpack. One line said, "Pharmacy girl staying, no visitors." I don't know if they followed her from the pharmacy, or if they were watching houses where older people lived alone. The officer told me not to guess too much because it would drive me crazy. The white pickup had plates that came back to a different make of truck. A neighbor 3 houses down had a doorbell camera that caught the woman walking up earlier that day with the jam, but the image was too far away to help much. Another neighbor said he had seen the truck on the street before, parked at different times, but he assumed it belonged to a contractor. Mrs. Calloway came home 2 weeks later. Her son installed a new door without a mail slot and took out every spare key he could find. I never stayed there again. I also stopped taking little side jobs from people I barely knew, even when I needed money. That part sounds simple, but it was hard. When you're broke, danger can look like an inconvenience you can't afford to notice. For a long time after that, any metal flap or loose door sound made me freeze. At work, when the mail carrier dropped envelopes through the back slot, I would feel my hands go cold. I still think about the note more than the door. The words were short, like someone making a grocery list. Garage empty. Girl inside. Cat. They had made me part of the house before I even knew they were watching it. I used to think a locked door meant the outside stayed outside. Now I know a locked door is only a boundary if you treat every little warning like it matters. Story 2. Every other Thursday after closing shift, I washed my work clothes at Benton Wash because it was the only laundromat near my apartment that stayed open all night. I was 28, working stock at a grocery store in Bakersfield, California, and at that point I was tired all the time. My roommate worked mornings, so I tried not to run our loud old washer after midnight. Benton Wash was cheaper anyway. The first strange thing was a sock. I was folding my shirts on the long metal table when a man walked up and held out one black sock like it belonged to me. "You dropped this," he said. I looked at it. It wasn't mine. I wore white ankle socks to work because they came in packs of 12. "No, that's not mine," I said. "You sure?" "Yeah." He stood there for a second too long, still holding it. Then he smiled a little, like we shared a joke, and put the sock on the table next to my clothes. I remember that because it was such a small thing. Not scary on its own. Just annoying. Benton Wash sat in a strip mall between a closed nail salon and a 24-hour convenience store. The laundromat itself didn't have an attendant after 10. There was a camera in the corner, a row of washers, dryers along the back wall, and a change machine that ate bills half the time. The convenience store clerk could see part of the laundromat through a glass door, but only if he was standing near the counter. I was vulnerable because I was exhausted and trying to save money. I had also just gone through a breakup, and I hated going back to my apartment because it felt empty in a way I wasn't used to yet. So I dragged everything out. Laundry took me 2 hours when it should have taken 1, because I sat there scrolling my phone and pretending I had nowhere else to be. That night, the place was almost empty. One older woman was using the big washer by the vending machine. A guy in a delivery uniform came in to use the bathroom and left. The man with the sock had 2 laundry bags, but I never saw him put anything in a machine. He was maybe mid-30s, average height, clean clothes, baseball cap. Nothing about him screamed danger. He looked like someone waiting for a friend. I went back to folding. A few minutes later, he came up again. "Do you have quarters for a 5? I shook my head. "Machine's right there," I said. "It's not taking mine." I didn't want to be rude, so I checked my pocket. I had 4 quarters from the dryers. I gave them to him. He gave me a $5 bill. I said, "That's too much." "Keep it," he said. "You're helping me out." I put it on the table, not in my wallet, because I had this weird feeling about touching it. Again, I didn't think he was dangerous. I thought he was odd. There's a difference, and tired people ignore odd all the time. The older woman left around 12:40. She took a call near the door, waved to no one in particular, and walked out with a rolling cart. That left me and him. I still had 1 dryer going with my jeans, towels, and grocery store hoodies. I sat by the window and watched the dryer spin. The man walked to the vending machine, looked at the snacks, didn't buy anything, then walked to the back hallway where the bathrooms were. He stood there and looked at the exit sign above the rear door. That back door was for emergencies and employees. It had a push bar and a faded sign that said alarm will sound. He pushed it lightly. No alarm. He looked over his shoulder and saw me watching. Then he smiled like he had done something harmless, like testing a door at a doctor's office. "Thought that was the restroom," he said. "The bathroom is right there," I said, pointing. He nodded, but he didn't go in. Instead, he came back and sat 2 chairs away from me. The dryer buzzed. I got up fast because I wanted to leave. I pulled my stuff out while it was still hot and dumped it into my blue plastic basket. My keys were clipped to the basket handle with a carabiner. I did that because I had locked my keys in my car twice before. The man watched me fold. He wasn't staring at my face. He watched my hands, my pockets, my keys. I put in my earbuds without playing music. I wanted him to think I couldn't hear him, but I also wanted to hear everything. He got up and walked to the change machine. He fed the same bill in and out 3 times. The machine rejected it each time. Then he said, "You work at Rayleigh's, right?" I looked down at my hoodie. It had the store logo on it. "Yeah," I said. "Night shift?" I didn't answer. He nodded like I had. I folded faster. That was when I noticed the sock he had put on the table earlier was gone. Not on the table. Not on the floor. Gone. I know that sounds stupid to focus on, but it made me look closer at my basket. There was something black clipped under the rim near the handle. At first I thought it was lint. Then I saw it was a small plastic disc, about the size of a quarter, with a dull black cover. It was stuck to the basket with a little square of gray putty. I touched it, and it came off in my hand. The man stopped feeding the bill into the machine. He turned his head just enough to see what I was holding. Neither of us said anything. I knew what it was because my ex had used one on his keys. A tracker tag. Not the expensive kind with a logo. A cheap one from online. The kind that chirps when a phone gets close. My first thought was that maybe it fell off someone else's stuff. Then I looked at the bottom of the tag and saw tiny blue fibers stuck to the putty. Same color as my basket. I put it on the table. The man walked toward me. "Hey," he said. "That's mine." I grabbed my basket with one hand and my keys with the other. The carabiner was unclipped. My keys were not there. They had been on the handle 10 minutes earlier. I checked the clothes, the table, the floor. I tried not to show panic, but my hands were moving too fast. The man was closer now. "You looking for these?" He held up my keys between two fingers. He didn't shake them or laugh. He just held them low, close to his side, so I would have to step toward him. I said, "Give them back." "You left them. They were clipped to my basket." He shrugged. The glass door to the convenience store was maybe 20 feet away. I could see the clerk inside behind the counter, looking down at his phone. Between me and that door was the man. He said, "Come here and get them." I didn't move. He took one step back toward the rear hallway. Not toward the front. Toward the back door that didn't alarm. That made everything clear enough. I picked up the tracker tag and threw it as hard as I could at the convenience store glass door. It hit with a sharp crack. The clerk looked up. The man's face changed for the first time. Not rage. More like irritation. Like I had broken a rule. I yelled, "Call somebody." The man moved toward me fast. I grabbed the basket and shoved it into him. Clothes went everywhere. He caught the edge of it against his hip, and that gave me enough space to run around the folding table. He didn't chase me across the whole laundromat. He walked quickly, which was somehow scarier because he looked like he was trying not to draw attention. I hit the glass door with my shoulder and pulled the handle. Locked. For 1 second I thought the clerk had locked me out. Then he unlocked it from his side and yanked it open. "Get in," he said. I stumbled into the convenience store. The clerk, a guy named Samir I had seen before but never really talked to, slammed the door and locked it again. The man reached the laundromat side of the glass a second later. He put one hand on the door and looked through at us. Samir said, "Back up." The man didn't. A truck driver who had been making coffee near the soda fountain turned around. He was huge, wearing a neon vest and boots. He walked over slowly and stood beside Samir. The man on the other side looked at him, then at me. Then he lifted my keys and pressed the unlock button. Outside, in the lot, my car lights flashed. He knew which car was mine. I felt sick, but not in a dramatic way. More like my body had gone hollow. Samir picked up the store phone and said, "I'm calling the cops." The man dropped my keys into a trash can beside the dryers. Then he walked to the back hallway and went out through the rear door. No alarm sounded. The police came later, but they did not arrive during the scary part. During the scary part, it was just me, a store clerk, a truck driver, and a locked glass door that suddenly felt very thin. The officers found my keys in the trash. They also found the black sock in the rear hallway, rolled around another tracker tag. It was like he had used the sock to hide it in his hand. Samir called the owner of Benton Wash, who came in at 2 in the morning in sweatpants and checked the cameras from the office computer. I watched some of it with him and the police. The man had come in 40 minutes before I noticed him. He didn't bring laundry. The bags were empty. He sat by the window until I turned my back to move clothes from the washer to the dryer. Then he walked past my basket, bent down like he was tying his shoe, and stuck the tag under the rim. Later, when I went to get dryer sheets from the vending machine, he unclipped my keys. The cameras also showed him testing the rear door twice. The owner said the alarm had been disconnected months earlier because it kept going off during deliveries. He had never fixed it. The $5 bill the man gave me was real. That almost bothered me more. It made the whole thing feel planned but casual, like he had money set aside for little interactions that made people feel obligated. The police didn't catch him that night. They took the video and the tracker tag. The cheap tag didn't lead to much because it wasn't registered the way the expensive ones are. The license plate from a nearby parked car he walked past didn't belong to him. He left on foot behind the strip mall, where there was an alley and a row of small repair shops. A week later, a detective called me. He said another woman had reported something similar at a different 24-hour laundry place across town. Her basket had a tracker on it, but she found it after she got home. She thought someone had followed her, but she couldn't prove it. Hearing that made me feel guilty, even though I know that doesn't make sense. I kept thinking if I had ignored the tag, he might have followed me too. I stopped going to Benton Wash at night. I stopped leaving my keys clipped to anything. I stopped wearing my work hoodie in public after closing because I didn't like strangers knowing where I spent 8 hours every night. The breakup stuff that had felt so heavy before suddenly felt small. I had been using that laundromat like a place to sit with my sadness, and I forgot it was still a place where strangers could study you. Samir still works at the convenience store. A few months later, I went in during the day to thank him properly. He acted like it was no big deal, but he told me he started keeping the glass door locked after midnight unless someone knocked. The truck driver left before I got his name. I wish I could thank him too. He never said anything heroic. He just stood there. For a long time, the sound of dryers buzzing made my chest tighten. Not because of the noise itself, but because I remembered how normal everything looked right before it wasn't. Fluorescent lights, warm clothes, a vending machine humming, a man holding a sock that wasn't mine. People say public places are safe because someone is nearby. That night taught me nearby is not the same as paying attention. A place can be open all night and still leave you alone. Story 3. The cheapest ride I ever accepted cost me more than the plane ticket. My name is Maya, I was 21, and at the time I was a junior in nursing school in San Antonio. I had flown to Denver for a weekend orientation connected to a summer hospital program. I was proud of myself for going, but I was also broke, nervous, and trying hard to act like I knew what I was doing. The strange thing happened at the airport pickup curb. It was close to midnight, windy, and my phone was at 9%. I had a backpack, one small suitcase, and a reservation at a cheap basement Airbnb in Aurora because the hotels near the hospital were too expensive. I had ordered a rideshare, and the app said my driver was 6 minutes away. Then a dark sedan pulled up near me, and the driver rolled down the passenger window. "Maya," he said, "hearing your name when you are tired and alone does something to your brain. It makes the situation feel official." I walked closer, but did not get in right away. "What's the name on the app?" I asked. He smiled, kind of confused. "You're Maya going to East Colfax, right?" That was close enough to my destination that I relaxed. My Airbnb was off a side street near East Colfax. The app showed a black Nissan. His car was dark blue, maybe black under airport lights. I tried to check the plate, but another car pulled behind him and honked. A rideshare pickup area at midnight is chaos. People yelling, trunks opening, drivers waving, security telling cars to keep moving. I asked, "Are you Luis?" He said, Yeah, app is glitching. Get in before they make me circle." That should have been enough for me to step back. But I was cold, embarrassed, and my phone had just dropped to 8%. My actual driver on the app wasn't moving on the map. I had been standing outside for 20 minutes because I had gone to the wrong level at first. I didn't want to be the girl holding up traffic while asking too many questions. So I got in. The inside of the car smelled like mint gum and old fast food. There was a cracked phone mount on the dash, but no phone in it. The driver was maybe early 30s, wearing a gray hoodie and a black beanie. Nothing about him looked wild or obviously wrong. He pulled away before I had my seatbelt all the way clicked. "Long flight?" he asked. "Yeah. School." I looked at him in the mirror. "My backpack," I said because it had my university patch. He nodded. "You from Texas?" I didn't answer that one. He could have seen my suitcase tag. He could have heard my accent. I gave myself little explanations because I wanted the ride to become normal. The app still showed my driver 6 minutes away. I thought maybe it hadn't updated because airport service was bad. I tried to refresh, but my phone froze for a second. The driver merged onto the road out of the airport. I said, "Can you start the ride?" "It is started," he said. "My app still says waiting." He glanced at me in the mirror. "Happens all the time here." I texted my friend Anna, who knew I had landed. "In car now. Phone dying. Text later." I meant for it to sound casual, but I also sent her my live location. At least I tried. The spinning circle stayed on the screen. The driver asked, "You staying with family?" "No." As soon as I said it, I regretted it. I added, "My cousin's meeting me there." He didn't respond. We drove for a while without talking. I kept looking at the route on my phone, but the map in my app still showed the real driver at the airport. I opened my regular maps and typed the Airbnb address. The blue dot lagged behind and jumped every few seconds. We were heading in the general direction of Aurora, so I told myself to calm down. Then my phone rang. It was a Colorado number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A man said, "Hi, this is Luis, your driver. I'm at Island 5. Are you still coming?" I went completely still. The driver in the front seat looked at me in the mirror. I said, "Sorry, what?" "I'm at the pickup spot," the real Luis said. "Black Nissan. plate ends in 48. I don't see you. The man driving me turned the radio down. I don't remember deciding what to do. I just knew I could not say, I'm in the wrong car, because the wrong car was locked around me. So I said loud and bright, oh, Uncle Ray already found me. I'm with him now. There was a pause on the phone. The real Luis said, you're with who? My uncle, I said. We're on speaker. I'll cancel. The driver's eyes stayed on me in the mirror. He said, hang up. I smiled like I didn't hear him. Into the phone I said, yeah, he's taking me to the station first. The police station. He works there. The driver reached back with one hand. Not all the way. Just enough to snap his fingers near my knee. Hang up, he said again, quieter. The real Luis heard something, because his voice changed. Ma'am, are you safe? My phone battery flashed 6%. The driver took the next exit. I said, I'm fine. I'll call you right back. I hung up before my voice shook. For a few seconds, neither of us talked. Then the driver said, why would you do that? I was canceling, I said. You lied. My uncle is meeting me. No, he isn't. He said it with no anger. Just certainty. The road got darker. We were no longer near the airport lanes. I saw warehouses, empty lots, a chain-link fence, and a gas station closed for construction. My phone had no signal for a moment, then one bar. I tried the door handle. It didn't open. Child lock. He saw the movement. Don't do that. I said, pull over. He kept driving. I said it again louder. Pull over. He laughed once through his nose. You don't even know where you are. That was the first sentence that sounded like the mask coming off. I looked around the back seat for anything useful. There were 2 water bottles, a receipt, and a fleece blanket folded on the floor. The window button worked, but only an inch. He had locked the controls after that. My phone buzzed. Anna, where are you? Your dot disappeared. I tried to type, but my hands were shaking too much. Then another call came in. The real Luis again. The driver said, do not answer. I answered. Before I could speak, Luis said, I called airport security. They said stay on the line if you can. I didn't know if that was true or if he was trying to scare the driver. Either way, I put him on speaker and held the phone low. The driver said, you stupid? I said, I need to throw up. He ignored me. I leaned forward and gagged. I wasn't acting much. I really did feel sick. I'm serious, I said. I'm going to throw up in your car. He cursed under his breath. I gagged again, louder. There are things people care about even when they are doing something bad. Apparently his car was one of them. He swerved into the parking lot of a low motel off a frontage road. The sign said weekly rates. The office was closed, but there were a few cars and a man smoking outside one of the rooms. The driver stopped near the far side of the lot, not by the office. Open the door, I said. Wait. He got out first. That was the part that saved me. He had to get out to open the back door because of the child lock. When he stepped around the car, I slid across the seat to the opposite side and started kicking the door with both feet. I don't know why. Panic picked something. The man smoking outside looked over. The driver opened my door and grabbed my suitcase handle, not me. I think he was trying to pull the bag out first, maybe to make me come after it. I screamed, I don't know him. The smoking man stood up. What? He yelled. I don't know him. The driver said, she's drunk. I screamed again, call somebody. The motel room door behind the smoking man opened. A woman came out holding a phone. Then another door opened 2 rooms down. The driver let go of my suitcase and said, crazy, like he was annoyed. I shoved past him, left the suitcase half in the car, and ran toward the woman with the phone. I only had my backpack. The driver got back in and backed out hard enough that my suitcase fell onto the pavement. He drove over the corner of it as he left. The woman grabbed my arm and pulled me into her room. She was maybe 50, wearing pajama pants and a winter coat. Her husband, the smoking man, stood outside and watched the car leave. He kept saying the plate number out loud so he wouldn't forget it. Inside their room, I finally started shaking so badly I had to sit on the floor. My phone died 2 minutes later. The woman plugged it into her charger and called 911 from her phone. Her name was Denise. Her husband was Paul. They were in Denver because Paul drove medical supply routes and had an early delivery. They were not dramatic people. They didn't ask 100 questions. Denise gave me water and said, "Breathe through your nose." The police did not catch the driver that night. They took statements from me, Denise, Paul, and the real rideshare driver, who had stayed at the airport for a while because he was worried. The app confirmed my actual ride had never started. I had gotten into a car that was not connected to the platform at all. The plate number Paul remembered came back to a silver sedan, not a dark one. The officer said the plate may have been copied, altered, or stolen. I never got a clear answer. A few days later, airport security contacted me through the police report. They had reviewed curbside logs and incident notes. They couldn't give me video, but an officer told me a man in a dark sedan had been told to move along twice before I got in. He had been circling the rideshare pickup lanes and calling out names when travelers looked confused. That was the part that stayed with me. He didn't know me at first. He learned me in pieces. My name was on the app screen I kept checking. My destination was visible when I held my phone near the window. My suitcase tag said Texas. My backpack said nursing. He didn't need to be smart. He just needed to stand close and wait for someone tired enough to make the details fit. The real Luis sent a message through the app later. It was short. He said he was glad I was safe and that he knew something was wrong when I said "Uncle," because he could hear the driver telling me to hang up. I never met him, but I still think about that. A stranger I didn't get in the car with helped more than the stranger I did. I missed the first morning of orientation. The program coordinator was kind about it after I sent the police report number. I went to the afternoon session with no suitcase, wearing the same hoodie from the flight. I sat in the back and kept checking the exits. I stayed the rest of the weekend in a hotel I couldn't really afford. I put the deadbolt and latch on every night and shoved a chair near the door, even though nobody came near me. I paid extra for the airport shuttle when I left. After that, I changed how I travel. I don't care if people behind me are honking. I check the plate, the driver's face, the car make, and the ride status. I ask the driver to say my name only after I ask for theirs. I carry a power bank. I don't post airport pictures until I'm gone. I don't let embarrassment make decisions for me. For months, I thought about my suitcase lying in that motel lot, one wheel cracked, clothes dragged out onto the pavement. Denise mailed it back to me in a taped-up box. There was nothing missing except a pair of shoes. I kept the luggage tag for a while, then threw it away because seeing my name printed that big made me uncomfortable. People think the scary part is being grabbed. For me, it was earlier than that. It was the moment I heard my name from the wrong mouth and wanted so badly for it to be normal that I helped make it normal. A stranger knowing your name does not mean they are safe. Sometimes it only means they got close enough to read it. Story 4. By the time the free furniture sign showed up at the end of the driveway, I had only been inside the house for maybe 40 minutes. My name is Leah. I was 24 when this happened, working the front desk at a dental office in Bloomington, Illinois. I had just moved into my first apartment, and most of my paycheck was disappearing into rent, gas, and a credit card I had used after a breakup. So when one of the hygienists at work asked if I wanted to house sit for her aunt for the weekend, I said yes before I even asked what it paid. Her aunt, Marlene, lived in a quiet older neighborhood near a little lake. It was one of those areas where every yard looked cared for, and every house had a name for the flower beds. Marlene was driving to Ohio for her granddaughter's graduation. All I had to do was water a few plants, bring in the mail, feed one orange cat named Sunny, and sleep there Friday and Saturday night so the place didn't look empty. I got there around 8:30 on Friday night, after work. I remember being tired and hungry, and also kind of glad to be alone in a clean house that smelled like lemon soap. My own apartment had a leaking sink and upstairs neighbors who walked like they were mad at the floor. The weird part started with the sign. I had parked in the driveway, brought in my overnight bag, found the cat, and was standing at the kitchen counter reading Marlene's note about the Wi-Fi. Then the kitchen motion light came on outside. I looked through the back window, but I didn't see anyone, just the patio and a bird bath. A few minutes later, I went to the front room to close the blinds, and that was when I saw the piece of cardboard propped beside the mailbox. It said in thick black marker, "Free dresser and garage items. Come around back. Ask for Leah." At first I just stared at it, not scared, more confused. My first thought was that some teenager had put it there as a joke. Then I thought maybe Marlene's aunt or neighbor had left it and written the wrong name. The strange part was my name. Marlene didn't know me except as the girl from her niece's dental office. I couldn't think of any reason someone in that neighborhood would know I was there. I went outside and grabbed the sign. I looked up and down the street, but nobody was walking around. A few houses had porch lights on. Somewhere a TV was playing loud enough that I could hear the laugh track. Normal neighborhood stuff. I took the sign inside and leaned it against the wall near the laundry room. I remember feeling embarrassed, like I had done something wrong by being there. That was one of my weaknesses back then. I hated bothering people. I hated making anything into a big deal. I had spent most of that year trying to act like I had my life together, even when I didn't. So I didn't call Marlene right away. I texted the hygienist, my coworker, and said, "Hey, weird question, is your aunt giving away furniture?" She didn't answer. It was late, and she had little kids. About 20 minutes after that, someone rang the doorbell. It wasn't a hard ring, just one normal press. Sunny the cat ran down the hallway and hid under a chair. I went to the front door and looked through the glass strip along the side. A man was standing on the porch with one hand in the pocket of his hoodie. He looked maybe 35. Not dirty, not drunk. Just a normal guy with a beard and a baseball cap. I didn't open the door all the way. I left the chain on and cracked it. "Can I help you?" He looked past my shoulder before he looked at my face. "Yulia?" I didn't answer that. I said, "What do you need?" "I'm here for the dresser." "There's no dresser." He blinked like I was the one being difficult. The post said free. "Garage stuff too." "What post?" He lifted his phone and showed it through the crack. I couldn't see much, just a marketplace page with a picture of Marlene's house. The caption said something like, "Cleaning out before moving. Free dresser, boxes, lamps. Come to back garage. Don't knock if late. Ask for Leah." My mouth got dry, but I still tried to keep my voice normal. "That's not real. Somebody made a fake post." The man looked annoyed, but not surprised. "So you don't have anything?" "No." He glanced toward the driveway, then at the door chain. "You sure?" "Yes." He stepped back. "People are weird." He walked off the porch and down the driveway. I watched him from the window until he turned onto the sidewalk. I didn't see what car he got into. After he left, I locked the deadbolt and the little button lock on the knob, then checked the back door. It was locked. The door from the garage into the kitchen was locked too. Marlene had an alarm panel, but her note said it was off for the weekend because she didn't want me to mess with it. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I finally called Marlene's cell. She didn't answer. I called my coworker next. She picked up on the third ring, sounding half asleep. I explained the sign and the man. She was quiet for a second, then said, "Aunt Marlene is not giving anything away. Do you want me to come over?" I said no. I said it was probably some dumb scam. I could hear one of her kids crying in the background, and I felt bad. She told me to stay inside, and she would call her aunt's daughter. I said okay. A little while later, I found the listing myself. It was on a local buy-sell group. The profile was called M. Kepler, which was close enough to Marlene's last name, Keller, that I figured people wouldn't notice. The account had no other posts. The pictures were not pictures from inside the house. They were old real estate photos from when the house had been sold years before. In one picture, the garage door was open, and I could see a brown dresser. The post had been edited 12 minutes earlier. The new line at the top said, "Leah is there now. She may be upstairs. Garage door sticks. Be patient." I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand, staring at that sentence. I didn't scream. I didn't run around the house. I just sat there, and the house got very quiet around me. The refrigerator hummed. The cat shifted under the chair. Outside, the motion light clicked off. Then the garage keypad beeped. It was a small sound. 2 little electronic beeps from the other side of the kitchen wall. I had heard keypads like that before. Someone was pressing buttons. I moved without thinking. I turned off the kitchen light first, which was stupid, but I think I just wanted the windows dark. Then I went to the door that led into the garage and put my palm against it. The knob didn't move, but I heard the keypad beep again. Then again. I backed away and called 911. The dispatcher asked for the address. I had to run to the counter and read it off Marlene's note because I hadn't memorized it yet. My voice sounded calm to me, but my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. While I was talking, someone outside gave the garage door one heavy pull. Not enough to open it, just enough to make the metal panels rattle. The dispatcher told me to get somewhere with a door between me and the garage. I went upstairs. The house had a small guest room at the end of the hall, and I shut myself in there. I turned the lock on the bedroom door, then stood by the window because I didn't know what else to do. From upstairs, I could see part of the driveway and the street. No one was standing in the open. That almost made it worse. The house looked normal. Porch light, maple tree, empty street. Then I heard a voice from below the window. "Leah." It was not shouted. It was almost polite. I crouched down. The dispatcher was still talking in my ear, asking where I was in the house. I whispered, "He knows my name." The voice came again, closer to the side of the house. "Leah, I drove all the way from Decatur." That made no sense, and it made perfect sense at the same time. It was meant to sound like a frustrated person from the listing, but his voice had no frustration in it. It was flat, like he was reading a line. Then I heard another sound from downstairs. Not the garage this time. The front doorknob. It twisted once, then stopped. I realized there might be more than one person, or the same person had moved around the house very fast. I pressed myself against the wall beside the bedroom door. I didn't want to be near the window anymore. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way. I heard the front storm door open and close softly. The main door did not open because I had locked it, but someone started tapping the glass strip with a fingernail. Tap, 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 like they were trying to get a cat's attention. I could hear my own breathing. I remember trying to breathe through my mouth, so I wouldn't make noise through my nose. It's a stupid detail, but that's what I remember. The phone buzzed against my cheek. My coworker was calling, but I couldn't answer because I was already on with 911. Then a text came through from her. "My aunt says leave if you can. She doesn't know any M. Kepler." I looked from the text to the bedroom door. Leaving did not feel possible. The front door was being watched, the garage was being messed with, and I did not know the house. I didn't know if there was a back exit upstairs. I didn't know which windows opened. Then I heard a man downstairs say, "She's up there." It was low, but I heard it clearly. That was the moment it stopped being about a fake furniture post. Someone had made the listing to get people near the house, but at least one person out there knew exactly why I was inside. The bedroom had a closet with sliding doors. I went into it, but I didn't close the doors all the way. I left a gap so I could see the room. My phone screen was bright, so I tucked it under my shirt and kept the speaker pressed to my ear. For a while, nothing happened. It might have been 30 seconds or 3 minutes. Then there was a heavy thud from downstairs, followed by the sharp chirp of the alarm panel. I had not armed it, but later I learned the panel made that sound any time a protected door was opened or forced. The door had not opened. The frame had shifted enough to trip the sensor. The dispatcher said, "Officers are close. Stay where you are." A car passed outside, then another. I heard sirens, but they sounded far away at first. The tapping at the front door stopped. Somebody ran along the side of the house. I heard mulch crunch under shoes. Then the kitchen motion light came on and shone up through the trees outside the guest room window. A shape crossed the yard, fast and bent forward. I stayed in that closet until an officer called up the stairs. Even then, I didn't answer right away. I asked the dispatcher if it was really them. She told me yes, and then the officer said my name and badge number through the door. Only then did I come out. The police did not catch anyone that night. What they did find was enough to make me feel sick for weeks. The garage keypad cover had been pulled loose. Not ripped off, just open like someone knew how to get at it. There were shoe prints in the damp mulch below 3 windows. The screen on a small bathroom window had been lifted halfway out of the track, then pushed back and crooked. On the back patio, under one of Marlene's flower pots, there was a folded piece of notebook paper in a plastic sandwich bag. The paper said, "Blue Honda. Leah. No alarm. Alone weekend. Post again after 9. Blue Honda was my car. Marlene drove a white Subaru. My coworker drove a minivan. Whoever wrote that note had seen me arrive or had watched the house after I got there. The fake listing disappeared before the police could get much from it. They still took screenshots from my phone. The man at the door had used a normal-looking profile to message about the dresser, but by morning that profile was gone too. A neighbor down the street told police he had seen a man standing near the mailbox around sunset, holding something flat under his arm. He thought it was one of those real estate flyers people leave on doors. Marlene came home early the next afternoon. She cried when she saw the note. I felt guilty, like I had brought the danger with me. She kept telling me I hadn't done anything wrong. The part that stayed with me was the listing. It was not just a random break-in. Someone had made a public excuse for strangers to approach the house. If I had opened the door wider, or gone to the garage to prove there was no dresser, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe nothing. Maybe the first man really was just there for free furniture. But someone else was using all of that noise as cover. I moved out of my first apartment 2 months later, mostly for unrelated reasons, but I changed a lot before then. I stopped posting where I was in real time. I stopped saying yes to favors just because I needed money. I started asking boring questions that used to make me feel rude. Is there an alarm code? Who else knows I'll be there? Are there cameras? Who has keys? I still house sit sometimes, but I never treat it like easy cash anymore. A locked door is not just a lock. It is the only thing between your private life and anyone who thinks your name is enough of an invitation. Story 5. The bus stop where it happened was not in the middle of nowhere. That is why I stayed there longer than I should have. I was 19, living in Spokane, Washington, and going to community college part-time while working closing shifts at a grocery store. I didn't have a car. I was saving for one, but every time I got close, something else came up. A dentist bill, a rent increase, my little brother needing school shoes. I was proud in a dumb way too. I hated calling people for rides because I did not want everyone to know I was still barely getting by. That night was a Thursday in October. I got off work at 10:15, bought a cheap microwave burrito for dinner, and walked 6 blocks to the bus stop on Division near a pharmacy and a 24-hour laundromat. It was cold enough that my fingers hurt, but not cold enough for snow. My phone was at 12% because I had forgotten my charger. The paper taped over the bus schedule was what made me slow down. It was laminated, which made it look official at first glance. It said, Route 14 temporary night pickup. After 10 p.m. use service stop behind pharmacy. Follow arrows. There was a black arrow pointing down the sidewalk toward the dark side of the pharmacy building. I had taken that route for almost a year, and I had never seen a night pickup behind the pharmacy. But there had been road work a few blocks south all week, and buses had been late. I stood there looking at the paper, trying to decide if I should trust it. A man on the bench said, "They changed it yesterday." I hadn't noticed him sitting there because he was tucked into the far end, under the shadow of the shelter roof. He was probably in his 40s, with a canvas jacket and a gray beanie pulled low. He had a backpack at his feet. He didn't look homeless, exactly. He looked like a guy waiting for a bus. I said, "For Route 14? Yeah. Behind the pharmacy? That's where I'm going." He said it like he had already explained it too many times. I looked down the street. There were cars going by, headlights sliding over wet pavement. The laundromat windows were bright. A woman inside was folding towels. The pharmacy itself was closed, but the sign was still lit. I should have gone into the laundromat right then and asked someone. But I was tired, and I didn't want to look stupid. That was my thing back then. I was always embarrassed before anything even happened. Embarrassed to ask the driver to wait. Embarrassed to ask my manager for a ride. Embarrassed to admit I was nervous at a bus stop. So I stayed. The man asked, "You going north or south?" "South." He nodded. "Same." Something about the way he said same bothered me, because he had answered too fast. But people make small talk at bus stops. Weird people make small talk too. It didn't have to mean anything. I opened the bus app. It showed the 14 coming in 8 minutes, but the little bus icon was still 4 stops away. Nothing on the app said the stop had moved. I refreshed it. My battery dropped to 10%. The man stood up and stretched. He picked up his backpack, then set it down again. His eyes kept moving to the laundromat windows, then to the arrow on the laminated sign. A woman came out of the laundromat carrying a basket. She crossed in front of the stop and got into a blue minivan. I almost asked her if she knew about the detour. I even opened my mouth. Then she shut the door and drove off. The man said, "You don't want to miss it. They don't wait back there. I looked at him. You've taken it from there? Last night. What time? He didn't answer right away. He looked down the sidewalk instead. Late. That answer should have been enough. But the bus app suddenly changed from 8 minutes to delayed, and I felt that tired little anger you get when you rely on public transit and it acts like your life doesn't matter. I said, I'll wait here a couple more minutes. He shrugged. Your choice. He walked toward the arrow, slow at first, then turned around after maybe 10 steps. You coming? No, I'm good. He watched me for another second, then kept walking. He turned the corner beside the pharmacy and disappeared. The stop felt worse after he left. It was not completely empty. Cars still passed. The laundromat was still open. But the shelter had a kind of dead silence inside it. I could hear the plastic ad panel creaking in the wind. 2 minutes later, a city bus came down Division. I stood up and stepped near the curb, waving a little with my phone in my hand. It was not the 14. It was out of service, but the driver slowed when he saw me. He did not stop. He pointed behind him, toward the same direction as the arrow, then kept going. That made the paper seem real again. I hated that. I hated how one tiny gesture could make me doubt myself. My phone hit 7%. My mom was at work overnight at a nursing home. My roommate was on a date across town. My manager had left before me. I could have called someone, but I pictured myself saying, I'm scared of a laminated paper, and I didn't do it. I walked toward the side of the pharmacy. There were 3 arrows. One was taped to a light pole. One was taped to the brick wall. One was taped to the back door of the pharmacy. None of them had a bus company logo, but they were all laminated, and the tape was neat. The service area behind the pharmacy had a loading dock, 2 dumpsters, and a row of employee parking spaces. Most of the lights back there were off. There was a narrow lane that led to an alley behind the laundromat and a closed dollar store. The man was standing near the loading dock. He was not looking at the road. He was looking at me. I stopped before I reached him. Is this it? I asked. He said, yeah. There was no signpost. No bus bench. No painted curb. Nothing. I said, this doesn't look like a stop. They don't want people crowding the front. That made no sense. There was nobody crowding the front. A sound came from behind me, and I turned too fast. It was just someone pushing a cart of laundry down the alley from the laundromat's back door. The person had earbuds in and didn't even look over. The man took 2 steps closer. Bus comes through there, he said, pointing to the alley. I looked where he pointed. The lane was too narrow for a bus. Maybe a small shuttle could fit, but not a city bus. I said, I'm going back to the front. His face changed. Not a lot. He didn't smile or frown. He just went blank, like he was done pretending. You already walked back here. I didn't answer. I started walking fast toward the sidewalk. He followed. Not running. Not even hurrying much. Just keeping close enough that I could hear his shoes. When I got near the corner of the pharmacy, another man came around it from the front side. Younger than the first one, maybe late 20s, wearing a black hoodie under a work vest. He looked at me, then looked behind me. For a second I thought he was just a random person. Then he said, she's early. The man behind me said, bus got delayed. I turned away from both of them and went straight into the laundromat. The bell above the door made a sharp little ding. There were 4 people inside. A college-looking guy sleeping in a plastic chair, an older woman pulling clothes from a dryer, a man at the change machine, and the attendant behind the counter. The attendant was a woman with short hair and glasses, maybe in her 50s. I walked right to the counter and said, "Can I stand here for a minute?" She looked past me through the window. The first man had stopped outside. The younger man was beside him now. They were not talking. They were both just watching the door. The attendant said, "Do you know them?" "No." "Did they follow you?" "I think so." The older woman at the dryer stopped folding. The attendant picked up the phone from behind the counter. She didn't make a big scene. She just said, "Stay right there." The younger man came inside. He smiled like we were all making this awkward for no reason. "Hey," he said to me. "Come on. We're going to miss it." The attendant put her hand up. "She's not going anywhere with you." He looked at her, still smiling. "She's my cousin." I said louder than I meant to. "I don't know him." The sleeping college guy woke up and sat forward. The man at the change machine turned around. The laundromat got quiet except for the dryers. The younger man's smile faded. He raised both hands a little. Okay, no problem. He backed out of the laundromat. The older man was already walking away from the window by then, heading toward the pharmacy's service lane. The attendant locked the front door after the younger man stepped outside. It was one of those push locks at the top. Then she told the man at the change machine to stand near the door. He did, without arguing. I was shaking by then. Not crying, just shaking hard enough that my teeth clicked once. The attendant asked if I wanted the police, but before I could answer, a bus pulled up to the real stop out front. It was the 14. The driver opened the door and looked confused because nobody was at the shelter. Then he saw all of us in the laundromat window. The attendant unlocked the door just enough to yell, "Is there a detour tonight?" The driver shouted back, "No." The attendant pointed at the sign on the bus shelter. Somebody put papers up. The driver got off the bus. That was the part that made the two men leave for good. The younger one had been standing near the corner of the building, half hidden. When the driver stepped down and started walking toward the shelter, the younger man took off down the sidewalk. The older man went the other way, behind the pharmacy. The bus driver took the laminated paper off the schedule case and looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at me through the laundromat window and said, "You were back there?" I nodded. He said, "Don't ever follow a paper sign at night." He said it like he was mad, but not at me. The attendant called the non-emergency police number, and then she called transit dispatch because she had the number posted by the counter. I missed that bus, but I did not care. The driver stayed parked there until another bus came behind him, and then he let me sit behind him while he waited for a supervisor. The police came about 25 minutes later. By then, the two men were gone. The proof came from the laundromat camera. The owner lived nearby and came over to pull the footage. At 9:38 that night, almost 40 minutes before I got off work, the older man walked up to the bus shelter with a folder under his arm. He removed the real plastic schedule from the front of the case, taped the fake laminated paper over it, then placed the arrows along the sidewalk. The younger man stood across the street the whole time, pretending to smoke. They did not rush. They acted like they had done it before. The camera also showed them watching 3 different people pass the stop before I got there. They ignored a man walking with headphones. They ignored a couple. They paid attention to a woman who looked at the sign, but she got picked up by a rideshare before they could approach. Then I walked up. The transit supervisor told me no route in that part of town used a service stop behind the pharmacy. He took pictures of the signs and said they had found fake notices before near bus stops, but usually for scams or people trying to redirect riders away from busy areas. He did not say what he thought those two men wanted. Nobody did. About a week later, an officer called me and said another report had come in from a bus stop 2 miles away. Same style of laminated sign. Different route number. A woman had started walking toward the temporary stop, then turned back when she saw 2 men waiting by a closed bank drive-through. She gave a description that sounded like the older man. They never told me anyone was arrested. For a while, I stopped taking late shifts. I borrowed money from my mom for rides, even though it made me feel awful. I bought a portable charger and a loud keychain alarm. I started standing under lights and checking the actual transit website before I moved from any stop. I also stopped worrying so much about looking rude. The part one still think about is how close help was. The laundromat was right there. Cars were right there. A bus drove by. But for about 2 minutes behind that pharmacy, none of that mattered. The corner blocked the street. The building blocked the windows. The fake arrows had done their job. I used to think danger had to pull you away from public places. Now I know sometimes it only has to move you 30 feet to the wrong side of a wall. Story 6. The cabin was cheaper because it was 20 minutes outside town, down a private gravel road with no streetlights. I was 30 when I stayed there. At the time I was working short contracts as an ultrasound tech, mostly filling in at rural clinics when somebody went on leave. That month I was in the Lake of the Ozarks area for 10 days. The clinic gave me a hotel allowance, but the hotels near the water were expensive, and I was trying to save money after a bad breakup that had left me paying for an apartment by myself back in Tulsa. I found the cabin on a rental app. It had good reviews, a little kitchen, a washer and dryer, and a photo of a screened porch facing the trees. The host's messages were friendly but brief. The kind of messages that made me feel like I was dealing with a normal busy person. I checked in on a Tuesday night after a long shift. It was almost 11 p.m. by the time I got there. I was carrying 2 grocery bags, my work bag, and a suitcase, trying not to drop my keys in the gravel. The door had a smart lock. I typed the code from the app, the lock clicked, and the second I stepped inside, a voice came from somewhere near the kitchen. Guest entry confirmed. I froze with one foot still on the porch. Then another voice, the same one, said, "Welcome back, Daniel." I laughed a little because it startled me, and because laughing felt better than standing there scared. I figured Daniel was the last guest or the host's husband. There was a small voice assistant on the kitchen counter, one of those round speakers with a light ring. I had seen them in other rentals. Usually they played music or controlled the thermostat. I shut the door behind me and locked it. The cabin smelled like cedar and laundry detergent. It looked exactly like the photos. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, small living room, kitchen, porch. No basement, no upstairs. That helped. I liked knowing there weren't extra rooms I hadn't checked. My first strange thought came when I set my groceries down. The voice assistant said, "Second guest not detected." I stood there holding a carton of eggs. I said out loud, "I'm the only guest." The speaker lit up, waited, then went dark again. I almost unplugged it right then, but I didn't. I had this habit of wanting rentals to stay exactly how the host left them, like I would be charged a fee for touching the wrong thing. I was also exhausted, and exhausted people will accept a lot just so they can sit down. I messaged the host through the app. "Hey, the speaker keeps saying Daniel and second guest. Just checking if that's normal." A reply came about 5 minutes later. "Old routines. Sorry. Smart home is dramatic. Ignore it." That sounded harmless enough. I put my groceries away, took a shower, and tried to call my sister, but the signal inside the cabin was weak. The Wi-Fi worked, so I texted her instead and told her the place was quiet. Around midnight, I was sitting on the couch eating cereal out of a mug because I couldn't find the bowls. The speaker woke up again. "Do you want to unlock the front door for Daniel?" I stopped chewing. The cabin was silent except for the fridge. I said, "No." The speaker said nothing. I went to the front door. The deadbolt was part of the smart lock, and the little screen was dark. I checked it anyway. Locked. I checked the back door to the screened porch. Locked. The porch itself had no stairs to the ground, just a door that opened to the living room. It was more like a room with screens. I told myself the device had picked up an old command. I did not want to be the dramatic renter who called a host at midnight over a speaker. I had worked a 12-hour day and still had to be at the clinic by 7:30. I wanted the situation to be normal more than I wanted to admit. I went to bed with the bedroom door open because closing it somehow made me feel more trapped. The next morning, nothing happened. Sunlight came through the curtains. Birds made noise in the trees. I made coffee in the little machine and felt silly about how tense I had been. I even said, "Good morning," to the speaker as a joke. It did not answer. I worked all day. The clinic was short-staffed, and by the time I drove back to the cabin, I was in that blank, tired state where you can do basic tasks but not much else. I stopped at a gas station for soup and crackers. The woman at the register asked where I was staying, and I said, "One of the rentals off Hollow Ridge Road." She made a face, not scared, just like she knew the road. "GPS gets people lost out there," she said. I thought that was what she meant. When I got back, the outside light was off even though I had left it on. I used my phone flashlight to type the code. The door opened. Inside, the thermostat had been turned down to 61. The cabin was cold. I messaged the host. "Is the thermostat on a schedule? It got really cold." No answer. I turned it up, locked the door, and changed out of scrubs. While I was in the bedroom, I heard the speaker in the kitchen chime. "Reed is waiting." I came out of the bedroom slowly. The speaker light was on. I said, "What?" It went dark. I checked the app messages. Still nothing from the host. Then a regular text came through from a local number. "Hi, this is Reed. Host asked me to stop by because panel shows door issue. I'm outside but don't want to scare you." I read that message 3 times. It sounded polite. It also sounded wrong. The host had not mentioned a Reed. The app listing did not mention a property manager. But I was in someone else's cabin on someone else's road, and I did not know how things worked there. In small towns, people do ask neighbors to help with rentals. That was how I explained it to myself. I did not text back. A minute later, there was a knock at the front door. Not loud. 2 taps. I looked through the little window beside the door. A man stood on the porch wearing a dark jacket and jeans. He looked maybe late 30s. Clean haircut. No tool bag. No uniform. One hand down at his side, the other holding his phone. He lifted the phone when he saw me looking. "Sorry," he said through the glass. "Your door panel keeps showing open." I kept the door closed. "The door is locked." "Yeah, I know. It's just sending alerts." "Who sent you?" "The owner." "What's her name?" He paused too long. Then he said, "Karen." The host's name on the app was Melissa. I stepped back from the window. He said, "Ma'am, I'm not trying to bother you. I just need to reset the panel." I said, "You can come back tomorrow. It's easier if you just open it for a second." "No." He looked down at his phone. At almost the same time, the smart lock made a small mechanical sound. Not the full deadbolt turning, but a click like it had received something and refused it. I stared at the lock. The man outside said, "Softer. It does that." That was enough for me. I moved away from the door, went into the kitchen, and unplugged the voice assistant. The light ring went off. I unplugged the router too, because it was sitting beside it, and I didn't know what else it controlled. The cabin went quiet. Then a second voice came from the hallway. "Connection lost." I had not noticed the smaller speaker plugged into the outlet near the bathroom. It was white and square, almost the same color as the wall. I yanked it out so hard the outlet cover shifted. There were no more voices after that, but the silence was not better. The man stayed on the porch. I could see his shadow through the curtain. My phone barely had 1 bar without Wi-Fi. I stood near the kitchen window until a call finally went through to my sister. It dropped after 10 seconds. I tried again. Dropped. Then the app message thread loaded, slow and broken. There was a new message from the real host. "Do not let anyone in. I don't have a read. Are you safe?" That message made everything feel too bright and too sharp. I typed, "Someone is here." He texted me. The message failed to send. The man knocked again. "Signal is bad out here," he called. "If you're trying to message Melissa, it may not go through. She told me to tell you." I had never said the host's name out loud. I went cold in a way I can still remember. Not shaking, just cold. The man said, "There's a carbon monoxide alert on my end. You need to step outside." The actual carbon monoxide detector was on the ceiling near the bedroom. It was silent. No chirp, no alarm, no flashing light. I knew what those sounded like because of work. Clinics have alarms and safety drills all the time. I said, "I'm calling emergency services." He answered too quickly. "They'll take forever. I can drive you up to the main road." There was no way I was getting in a car with him. But staying in the cabin felt worse by the second, because he seemed connected to the lock, the speakers, the thermostat, and my messages. I did not know what he could open or shut next. So I did something that sounds calmer than it felt. I spoke loudly, toward the dead speaker on the counter, as if it still worked. "I'm getting in the shower. I can't deal with this right now." Then I turned on the bathroom fan in the shower. I left the bathroom light on. I did not get in. I put my work shoes on, grabbed my car keys, purse, phone, and the little overnight bag I had not fully unpacked. My suitcase stayed in the bedroom. The front porch boards creaked. The man was moving away from the door, maybe toward the side of the cabin to listen or look for a bathroom window. I waited until I heard gravel crunch near the far wall. Then I opened the front door and ran to my car. Not a movie run. Not graceful. I almost fell off the porch step because I had my bag over one shoulder and my hands full. I got in, locked the doors, started the engine, and backed out so fast my rear tires threw gravel. The man came around the cabin as my headlights swung across him. He was not running. He just raised one hand like he wanted me to stop. I drove down the gravel road, trying to get my phone to load the map. The road was narrow and black between the trees. I kept thinking a deer would jump out. I kept thinking I had left my suitcase. I kept thinking he knew where the road came out. About half a mile from the cabin, there was a wooden arm across the private road. It had been upright when I drove in the night before. Now it was down. I stopped with my foot hard on the brake. There was a keypad box beside the road. I had no code for it. I tried pushing the arm up by hand, but it was locked. My phone had no service at all there. Headlights appeared behind me. Not close at first. Just 2 white points coming around the bend. I got back in my car and reversed until my bumper almost touched brush. There was a narrow dirt pull-off to the right, more like a tractor path than a road. I had noticed it when I drove in because there was a faded sign that said fire access, keep clear. I turned down it. My little sedan scraped branches on both sides. I went maybe 15 miles an hour because the path was rutted and I was scared of popping a tire. The headlights behind me stopped at the wooden arm. They did not follow onto the fire path, but I could see them through the trees for a while. The path came out behind a small volunteer fire station. The bay doors were closed, but there were 2 pickup trucks outside and a light over the side door. 2 men were standing near one of the trucks, drinking coffee from paper cups. I pulled in crooked and got out with my hands up like I had done something wrong. One of them said, "You okay?" I said, "Someone's following me from a rental cabin." He opened the side door of the station and said, "Come inside." That was the first time that night I felt like the ground was real under me. They let me use their phone. One of them called the sheriff's office. The other stood by the window and watched the road. No car came past the station while we waited. A deputy came about 20 minutes later. Then the real host called the station phone because my sister had gotten one of my dropped calls and found the rental listing. The host sounded scared and angry. She said the cabin had smart devices left over from when her nephew helped manage the property. He had been removed from the app months earlier after money went missing from bookings. She thought all his access had been cut off. It had not. The proof came in pieces over the next few days. The smart lock history showed several remote unlock attempts while I was inside. The thermostat had been changed from an old shared account. The voice assistant account was still tied to a user name the host recognized as her nephew's. The rental app later sent me a safety email saying the listing was suspended while they investigated unauthorized third-party access. The text number that called itself Reed was never matched to an employee or neighbor. The host told the deputy no one named Reed had permission to be there. The wooden arm across the road was not controlled by the rental app. It belonged to a group of property owners. Someone had lowered it manually. There were tire tracks near the keypad area, but that was about all anyone could say. I never got my suitcase back myself. The deputy met the host there the next day and collected it. Nothing seemed missing, but I threw away the toothbrush and makeup bag anyway. I know that sounds silly, but I could not stand the thought of using anything that had spent another night in that cabin. I stayed the rest of the contract in a chain hotel beside a highway, the kind with thin towels and loud ice machines. I slept better there than I had in that pretty cabin. For months afterward, I checked every rental for smart speakers as soon as I walked in. If I found one, I unplugged it and put it in a drawer. I stopped booking places on private roads. I stopped being impressed by cheap nightly rates and nice photos. I also stopped assuming a friendly message in an app meant the person on the other end had control of their own property. The voice assistant was not the danger by itself. It was just the mouth. The scary part was that someone outside could use a normal house feature to make the place feel like it belonged more to him than to me. A cheap room can cost more than money if it makes you argue with your own fear. Story 7. By the time I reached the town, the rain had turned the highway into a black sheet, and I had already passed 2 cars in the ditch. I was 29, a dental assistant from Amarillo, driving alone through northern Arkansas to get to my cousin's wedding. I had taken the cheapest route, packed snacks instead of stopping for real meals, and booked the cheapest place I could find because I was trying to save money. My ex had moved out 3 months earlier and left me with a lease I could barely cover. I didn't want to tell my family I was struggling, so I acted like everything was fine. The rental was listed as quiet upstairs room in historic downtown building. It was above an old feed store in a tiny town I had never heard of before that week. The photos showed wood floors, a little kitchen, and a bed under a slanted ceiling. It had 4 reviews. They were short, but good enough. The host's name on the app was Cal. At 8:13 p.m., while I was parked under a gas station awning trying to see through the rain, Cal sent me a message. Roads are bad. Park behind the green building. Stairs are an alley. Key code 1947. Keep curtains open halfway so passing patrol can see the unit is occupied. That last part seemed odd, but I was exhausted. I had been driving since morning. My shoulders hurt, my phone was at 9%, and I wanted a dry room with a lock. Downtown was only one street. Most of it was closed. The feed store had a faded sign with a rooster painted on it and big front windows full of dust. The building was green, but not bright green like in the listing photos. More like old paint that had given up. I parked behind it in a gravel lot. There was one other vehicle there, an older silver truck with no one inside. Rain hammered the roof of my car, so hard I sat there for a minute building up the nerve to get out. Then my phone buzzed. Take bags in one trip if you can. Alley floods. I looked around. There was no way Cal could have known I was still in my car unless he was nearby or watching a camera. The listing did say the entrance had a security camera, so I told myself that was it. Lots of rentals had cameras outside. It was normal. I grabbed my suitcase, purse, and charger bag, then ran through the rain toward the alley stairs. Halfway up, I saw the camera. It was not mounted above the door like a normal doorbell camera. It was a small trail camera strapped to the railing with a black bungee cord, the kind hunters use. It pointed directly at the stairs. I remember stopping under it, rain dripping down my neck, thinking, that's cheap but not illegal. The code worked. The door opened into a narrow hallway with a stale smell, like old wood and dust. The upstairs room was bigger than I expected. It had a bed, a couch, a little kitchenette, and 2 windows facing the street. The curtains were pulled all the way open. On the kitchen table was a handwritten note. Welcome. Please do not move furniture. Please do not unplug router. Please leave curtains halfway open after dark. Old buildings need airflow. That did not make sense. Curtains have nothing to do with airflow. But I had stayed in weird cheap places before. Some hosts had rules that sounded like they were written by people who did not talk to other humans much. I plugged in my phone. It charged for about 10 seconds, then stopped. The outlet was loose. I tried another one by the couch. That one worked. I texted my cousin, made it. Place is weird but fine. She sent back, please don't die before my wedding. I sent a laughing emoji, even though I didn't feel like laughing. The first thing I did was check the door. It had a deadbolt and a chain. The deadbolt locked fine. The chain was old but solid. There was another door near the bathroom, but it was screwed shut with 2 metal brackets. A paper sign taped to it said, Owner Storage. Do not open. I took a shower, changed into sweatpants, and heated a cup of noodles. Outside, the town was almost empty. A single streetlight flickered near the corner. Across the street, there was a diner with a neon pie sign in the window. It looked closed, but I saw people moving inside. At 10:04 p.m., the app message sound went off. Cal wrote, everything good? I wrote, yes, thank you. He replied immediately. Door locked. I stared at the message. Most hosts ask if you got an okay. They do not ask if the door is locked. I wrote, yes. He sent back a thumbs up. I sat on the bed and tried to watch videos, but the Wi-Fi was terrible. My phone was only at 23%. I kept thinking about the trail camera on the stairs and the curtain rule. After a while, I got up and closed the curtains more than halfway. Not all the way. Just enough that someone on the street couldn't look straight in. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Curtains need to stay halfway. I did not move. Another message came. Town ordinance. Patrol checks vacant buildings. That was when I stopped trying to make it normal. I went to the front window and stood to the side, not in front of it. I lifted the curtain a tiny bit and looked down at the street. Nothing. I looked toward the alley behind the building. From that angle I could see the gravel lot, my car, the silver truck, and the top of the stair railing. A man was standing by the bottom of the stairs. He wore a dark raincoat with the hood up. He was looking at his phone. My phone buzzed. Can you come down? Need you to sign storm damage form for insurance. I backed away from the window. I typed, can do it in the morning. He replied, has to be tonight. I didn't answer. A few seconds later, there was a knock at the door. Not loud. 2 quick knocks. I stood in the middle of the room and stared at the door like it might open by itself. The man outside said, it's Cal. His voice was younger than I expected. The profile picture on the app showed a man in his 50s with a gray beard. This voice sounded maybe 30. I said, "I'm not opening the door." Silence. Then he said, "I just need a signature. Leave it outside. It'll get wet. I'll sign it tomorrow." A long pause. Then calmer, he said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I picked up my phone and called the number listed on the rental app, not through the message thread. It rang 4 times. A woman answered. "Hello." I said, "Is this Cal?" She said, "No." "Who is this?" I told her I was staying in the room above the feed store. The line went quiet. Then she said, "Get out of there." My whole body went cold. She spoke fast after that. She said her father's name had been Calvin, but he had been dead for 2 years. The family used to rent the apartment, but they stopped after the feed store closed. She had been trying to get the listing removed for months because someone kept making copies of it with old photos. While she was talking, the doorknob moved. The chain held. I stopped breathing. The woman on the phone said, "Are you alone?" I couldn't answer. I was watching the door. The knob turned again, harder this time. Then something slid under the door. A folded paper. The man outside said, "Phone call won't help you up here." I stepped back until my legs hit the bed. The woman on the phone said, "Listen to me. There's a diner across the street called Maze. Call them. Ask for June. I'm calling the sheriff, but they're 20 minutes out in this weather." 20 minutes felt like an hour. I whispered, "He's outside the door." She said, "Do not go down those stairs alone." The call dropped. My phone had 6% battery. I looked at the paper on the floor. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe because I needed to know what kind of trouble I was in. It was a photocopy of my driver's license. Not a good copy. Grainy, slightly crooked. But it was mine. I had uploaded a photo of it through the rental app for verification 2 days earlier. Written under it in black marker were the words, "Need original." I put it down and felt like I might throw up. The man knocked again. "Hannah," he said. I had never put my full first name in a message to him. It was on my ID. I looked around the room for another way out. The windows faced the street, but they were old and painted at the edges. I tried one anyway. It moved up an inch, then stuck. Even if I got it open, I was on the 2nd floor. The drop to the sidewalk was too high. The screwed shut storage door was the only other option, but I did not know what was behind it. I also did not want to open something that might make more noise. Then I remembered the diner. I searched the name with my phone barely alive. Nothing loaded. The Wi-Fi spun and failed. I turned Wi-Fi off and got 1 bar of service. I searched again. A number came up. My battery hit 4%. I called. A woman answered with a tired voice. "Mice." I said, "I need June." "This is June." I spoke so fast I barely understood myself. I told her I was in the room above the old feed store, and a man was outside my door, trying to get me to come down. June did not ask a lot of questions. She said, "Stay on the phone. I can see the building." I went to the window and moved the curtain just enough to look out. Across the street, the diner lights were on in the back. A woman stood in the front window, holding a phone to her ear. She said, "Is he on the stairs?" I whispered, "I think he's at my door." June said, "I'm sending 2 men over. When they get to the bottom of the stairs, you come out fast. Bring your keys and purse. Leave the suitcase." I said, "What if he's still at the door?" "Then you scream loud enough for me to hear." That was the plan. That was all there was. I put on my shoes with my hands shaking. I grabbed my purse and car keys. My suitcase sat open by the bed with half my clothes inside. I left it. Outside the door, it was quiet. Too quiet. June stayed on the phone. I could hear her breathing and talking away from the receiver. "Ray, get your coat. Take Tommy. Now." A minute later, 2 men came out of the diner. One had a flashlight. The other carried what looked like a tire iron, held down at his side. They crossed the street through the rain. At the same time, footsteps moved outside my door. The man was going down the stairs. June said, "I see him." I looked through the peephole. It was old and cloudy, but I saw a dark shape moving away. June said, "Wait, wait." The 2 men reached the bottom of the stairs. Then June said, "Go." I opened the door. The hallway was empty except for the folded paper on the floor and wet footprints leading to the stairs. I left the paper. I ran. Halfway down, I saw the man in the raincoat standing at the bottom, but he was not alone anymore. The two men from the diner were there, blocking him from the stairs. The one with the flashlight looked up at me and said, "Keep coming." The man in the raincoat turned and looked at me. I never saw his whole face clearly, just the lower half, pale in the flashlight beam, with rain running off his hood. He said, "She owes me money." The diner man said, "No, she doesn't. She rented from me." "No, she didn't." I kept moving. My foot slipped on one step, and I almost fell, but the man with the flashlight reached up and grabbed my arm. He pulled me behind him. The raincoat man took one step toward us. Then June came out of the diner with another phone in her hand and yelled, "Sheriff's on the line, and I've got you on camera from here." He looked at her. Then he ran. Not toward the street, toward the gravel lot behind the building. A few seconds later, the silver truck started. It backed out too fast, hit a trash can, and disappeared down the side road with no headlights. The sheriff did not arrive for almost half an hour because of the storm. By then I was inside the diner wrapped in a dry tablecloth because June couldn't find a blanket. My phone had died. June gave me pie I couldn't eat. The deputy who arrived knew about the fake listings. He looked angry but not surprised. He took my statement, then went across the street with the owner's daughter, who had driven in after calling me back. Her name was Melissa. She was the woman from the phone. They found the trail camera on the stair railing. It had a memory card in it. The deputy said later it had pictures of me arriving, pictures of my car, and pictures of other people on different nights. Some were guests. Some were just people walking behind the building. Inside the room, they found the photocopy of my ID still on the floor. The storage door that had been screwed shut did not lead into another room. It opened to a narrow service space behind the wall, where old electrical panels and pipes ran along the building. There was dust everywhere except on the floor near the inside of my door, where someone had been standing or kneeling more than once. The deputy said it looked like whoever was doing it had access to the building before guests arrived and used that service space to listen near the room. He did not say more than that, and I did not ask him to. My suitcase was still there. Nothing had been taken except one thing. The printed wedding invitation from my purse was gone. That detail kept me awake for weeks. It had the town, the church, the date, and my cousin's name on it. The deputy told me to warn my family and the venue. I did. Nothing happened at the wedding, but I barely remember any of it because I kept watching the doors. The rental app refunded my money and sent me a safety email full of careful language. They said the listing had been removed. Melissa said they had removed it before. It kept coming back under slightly different names, with old photos and fake reviews. I drove home after the wedding in daylight and stayed at chain hotels for both nights, even though I had to put them on a credit card. I don't book cheap private rooms anymore. I don't care how nice the photos look or how many people say it was cozy. I call. I check addresses. I look for the same listing on different sites. And if a host ever tells me to keep curtains open, park somewhere hidden, or come outside after dark, I leave. The scariest part was not the man at the door. It was how close I came to obeying him just because he sounded calm and used my name. A stranger does not need to break a door down if he can convince you to open it yourself. If you made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more stories that might just keep you up at night.